All right, it's 10 o'clock. So I just wanted to welcome everybody and thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join us for the TT Mac Tile Tech Talk about hard surface maintenance. I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to our wonderful speakers from Custom Building Products. John Alley has been a dedicated professional in the industry for nearly 20 years. For the past 10 and a half years, he's served as the Commercial Architect Service Representative at Custom. John is an active member in the industry, sitting on the board of directors for TT Mac. Additionally, he's currently the director of the Vancouver chapter of Construction Specifications Canada. Louis Carvalho brings over 25 years of experience in the tile and flooring industry to his work. He's spent the last 15 years as a hands-on tradesman. Oh, he spent 15 years as a hands-on tradesman before joining Custom Building Products, where he has dedicated the last 11 years to supporting customers on both the tile setting and self-leveling sides of the business. This unique combination of field experience and product knowledge makes him a valuable resource for industry professionals.
I
Over
just
to you
loaded up.
guys.
I'm just on a webinar. So yeah, no, all good. Yeah, they uh well
Just as a reminder to everyone, mute yourself. So thanks, Lisa, for the quick little introductions there. And as Lisa said, what we're going to be discussing today is care and maintenance for tile and natural stone installations and products as a whole. Key there being tile. I guess little tidbit is sometimes you do need to seal porcelain tiles. This is an accredited presentation, and if you do require a certification of completion, please reach out to either Lisa or myself afterwards, and we can have that arranged for you. What we're going to be discussing today, outside of just cleaning and maintenance as a whole, but primarily we're going to be discussing sealers. What are they? What can we expect from them? We're going to be looking at water versus solvent-based sealers, topical versus penetrating sealers, color enhancers, maintenance, and then some chemical considerations that we need to bring into play after the installation is done and how we're going to address this moving forwards. So this is a fantastic slide. Lewis and I love using it all the time, but it takes 2 weeks to lay this floor, and a spill takes seconds to ruin it. And this really is the key when it comes to natural stone installations and ensuring that what the client's going to get is going to maintain throughout the longevity of the installation itself. So one of the big things that we always get asked, and it's kind of a thorn in all of our sides, but people always call and go, all right, I need a sealer, or I need a cleaner or a problem solver, whatever it may be. What do you recommend? Well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to know our installation. We need to know what we're looking at, whether it's a residential or commercial, whether it's floor or wall or ceiling, whether it's interior or exterior. We need to know what we're looking at. We need to know of whether it's a stone or a porcelain tile that's been installed or going to be installed. And then further to that, what type of stone, if it is a stone being used, that's being installed. Not all stones are equal. Not all porcelain tiles are equal. And in some cases, certain cleaners and problem solvers and maintenance products will be used on different products depending on what they are and what that end result's going to be. Further to that, we need to look at the environment as a whole. Is it an interior or an exterior installation? Are there any temperature concerns that we could run into? The top right photo here of a flagstone being installed exterior. This is a great example of where a sealer's been put on top of a flagstone that's been baking in the sun, and you can see how the sealant itself has flashed and created that white color. In some cases, this can be extraordinarily difficult to remove. To the point where it could damage the stone surface itself. So something to be aware of. Also, what we need to look at is moisture concerns. Is it a wet slab? Is it an exterior installation? Has the stone been sitting outside in the soaking wet for 4 days before being brought inside? In some cases, if you're to seal that right away and possibly, depending on the type of sealer, trap the moisture from within, it could cause issues in the future. So all these different things that come into play. Moving right on into it, we'll look at sealers. They can be used interior, exterior. They can be applied multiple different ways, but it's not a one size fits all. So the big question is always, why do we seal? And do we need to seal? And this is a great example here of a limestone that had red wine poured onto it and exposed for 24 hours. The stone on the right had a sealer. The stone on the left did not. And you can see how that red wine has penetrated into the stone itself. Could that, with some more aggressive cleaners, be cleaned off? Possibly. But you can see how, with generally a minimal cost of sealing a floor, you can see how much better the right side of that stone is. And the big thing with sealers, and I'll touch on it numerous times during this presentation, but sealers give you more of a reaction time to deal with issues. Not that they are a problem solver, or once it's done, once it's installed, it's good for life. But it allows you to have that holy crap moment and be able to clean that floor. So, the definition is here on the screen of what sealers are. It's a liquid applied product through various means that provides a given degree of stain resistance and a reactionary time. These products may or may not change the color of the stone or tile that's being applied over. It may be a topical product, or it may be a penetrating product. And once again, a lot of this presentation is going to be me repeating myself to some degree, but not all these products are considered equal. So once again, if we're looking from a manufacturer standpoint, like Lewis and I, or if we're looking at it from an architectural standpoint, we really need to understand the full spec of the installation itself to understand which sealers and maintenance products are going to be best geared for that installation. So what sealers do? They can help reduce efflorescence from tile. It helps make graffiti easier to clean off in a lot of cases. One that isn't being used as much, but it can come into play, is they can help fix granite slab profiling and being able to add almost a color enhancer to it to bring it back without having to polish that edge. And nature of the product is the way that they're installed is they can help with neglected installations. And these photos on the right are a perfect example of where a sealer was applied to the stone. It was neglected for years. They were able to quickly come in and clean it because that sealer was present, where otherwise it would have been thousands of dollars and possibly grinding to help mitigate that problem. Sealers do provide a degree of stain resistant, but they are not stain proof, or do not create a stain proof. As I said before, they help with ongoing maintenance and having to reduce or helping to reduce the overall cost of maintaining that floor while sealing, whatever it may be. They help promote better hygiene and whatnot, because they're filling the pores of that stone or tile and preventing contaminants from getting within it. Depending on the type of sealer, it can help minimize some of the etching in a calcium-based tile, but be careful with these, because some of these calcium-based tiles can be temperamental at best to deal with. So the big thing is when we're discussing sealers, much like I've said before, not all sealers are considered equal or created equal. So you really have to know what components are going into it and how that's going to react with your tile or stone installation. The big thing with sealers is you have to look at the carrier itself. I'll discuss this a little bit further in depth, but you have either a water or a solvent-based carrier, and then all of your sealer components that are built into it. And what we're trying to do with the combination of that sealer and the carrier itself is be able to get into those pores close up those pores so dirt and grime and contaminants aren't going to be able to get into it, possibly causing issues. So you can see from the photos on the last slide and this slide here, how that sealer, the particles are getting into that pore structure itself. They will bond to the surface of that tile or stone and create a layer to prevent contaminants from interfering with it, etching it, staining it, creating more dirt, or allowing dirt to build up on the surface of that product. What sealers don't do is they don't create a maintenance-free installation. Common misconception, much like a lot of things in the flooring industry, is, you know, once we put a sealer on the floor, it's now going to become stain proof. This is much like how within the industry we say, oh yeah, it's self-leveler, it'll level itself. Well, no, you actually have to push it around. Sealers you actually have to maintain, you have to work with. You're going to have to reapply, depending on the installation and depending on the environment, anywhere from realistically 6 months to a year, up to 5 to 10 years, depending on the stone, depending on the cleaners and everything that's being used. But just because a sealer's been applied doesn't make it maintenance free and doesn't make it stain proof. Sealers do nothing more than allow or create a workability time or a reactionary time for you to be able to get on top of whatever that is and clean it before it causes issues. They do not change the freeze thaw sensitivity of stone. If you have a very moisture sensitive stone that's going to be installed exterior, sealers are not going to solve that problem of, oh, well, now it's going to be able to sustain it. No. Sealers as well will not just allow you to use any type of cleaner. You have to be very conscious about what types of cleaners are going to be used on it. And once again, I'll discuss that right at the end of the presentation with maintenance, but just because there's a sealer doesn't mean, as I said, you can insert whatever cleaner product you want. You have to be cognitive of that. With sealers, once again, it comes back to that nomenclature of, okay, I put a sealer onto the floor, wall, ceiling, whatever it may be. That stone assembly is now bulletproof. No, there are unreal expectations. Here's a great example here of a flagstone retaining wall. It was sealed, but moisture is still being able to flow through that sealer, and you're still getting rust to bleed out of it. Sealers will not stop that rust itself from bleeding out. That's something that's going to have to be involved with maintenance to be able to mitigate that, but sealers will not, as I said, immediately stop this. So why do we seal? You know, it creates that reactionary time. It gives you that depending on the installation, depending on the environment, that holy crap time of, I spilled something and I need to clean it up. And we seal because we don't want to have an unhappy customer coming back to us. Now, this is a great example here of a floor that was put down. They were doing some mock-ups and tried to clean the floor afterwards. And because it wasn't sealed prior, you can see that staining that's now deposited onto the surface of that stone. It's going to be very difficult to be able to remove that, and that's why we seal. From a residential standpoint, you know, worst case scenario. I'm from Vancouver, so I apologize in advance for anyone that's not from Vancouver, or these references may not necessarily ring true, but in Vancouver, $250,000 for a kitchen reno is not out of the norm. And hypothetically speaking, in that $250,000 kitchen reno, let's say, you know, Mrs. Smith really wants a white Bianco Carrera. That could be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for material and labor to have it installed. First time Mrs. Smith has a party, she invites her friends over and someone spills red wine and she didn't seal the stone. Well, cool. Your white stone now has red all over it. If she had spent a little bit of money to seal it, it will help mitigate that. You know, similarly, showing the photo here, kids are pulling stuff out of a refrigerator, spills something on the floor. The sealer allows us to have that opportunity to go, okay, I can clean this up before it's going to alter the surface or impregnate into the stone itself, causing a stain or an etching that could last the lifetime of the floor. So important things that we have to look at with sealers, and I briefly touched on it earlier, but the degree of stain resistance, not all sealers are created equal. You can have sealers that range anywhere from $10, $15 up to $100+. And really what you're paying for in cases like that is the more cost-effective sealers themselves have more of that carrier in it, traditionally water, where the more expensive sealers, you're paying more for the sealer part that's built into it. So yeah, you may go to a insert DIY big box store and buy a gallon of sealer for $25. Well, you're essentially paying probably $24 of that is for water to be able to get the sealer out, and it's not going to perform as well as a more premium quality sealer. We also need to look at the sealers of what they're going to do for vapor transference, how they're going to allow that stone assembly, indoor, exterior, whatever it may be, to breathe. If we are looking at an exterior installation, how UV resistant it is and how it's going to stand up to the obviously the sunlight coming in. Great examples of this: exterior walls, pool decks, things of that nature where you've got the sun baking on it for a good portion of the year. How slip resistant the sealers are going to be, and to some degree this comes down to improper installation, but also solvent versus water-based sealers, which once again I'll touch on a little bit further, but ensuring that the sealer that you're going to put over this floor is not going to change what the DCOF is going to be, or the COF is going to be of that floor. How chemical resistant are these sealers? How are they going to stand up to de-icing salts or some maintenance products that are going to be used? What the life cycle or lifespan of these sealers are going to be. And once again, this is something that I just touched on, but generally some sealers or good quality sealers you'll get in a residential setting 5 to 10+ years out of them, depending on your maintenance scheme or your maintenance schedule and how you're maintaining it. The cleaners are going to be. Other things to think about or to bring into consideration as well is what's the finish look that you're going for. There are lots of different types of sealers that exist within the industry. Do you want a high gloss? Do you want a low gloss? Do you want a wet look? Do you want an enhanced look? Or do you just want a natural finish? And depending on which route you want to go, there's a sealer that could do that. But as I'll discuss a little bit later, understand some of the cautions that you may have to have with that. And lastly, depending on the environment that they're going into, we have to look at VOCs. We have to look at flammability. This is a little bit of an older outlier. This more so comes into solvent-based, but I always like to bring it up because solvent-based sealers do still exist in the industry, just at a much smaller scale than what they used to be. So this is just a great example here. Tile on the left is showing a higher quality sealer, and you can see how the water has beaded on the surface. Tile on the right is showing a lower quality sealer where that water has just been able to get into the stone itself and kind of darken and wet out that stone. Obviously, the one on the right is not what we're looking for. We want to see installations with the sealer that's being used on the left. So water-based versus solvent-based sealers, which one's better for tile and stone? Much like we need to know our installation, we need to know a little bit more about the tile. But we need to know how that tile is going to react with the sealer. Big caveat to that, and it's something that I've been alluding to already, is generally speaking now in the industry, and Lewis, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's probably 95+% of all sealers that exist within Canada now are water-based. And the main reason for that, and the switch happened about 10-ish years ago, is Canada got a lot more stringent on VOC requirements, red label requirements, and the solvent-based sealers don't meet those requirements that are now being set out by the Canadian government and by the industry as a whole. So while solvent-based sealers exist, and we are talking about them, understand now that the vast majority of those sealers are going to be water-based. The technology has gotten a lot better. Anyone that's been around for a little bit of time remembers the solvent-based sealers and how those things were absolutely bulletproof. The technology within water-based sealers has gotten significantly better from what they used to be. This is a great example here of showing a non-sealed tile, 2 different water-based sealers, and 3 solvent-based sealers, where we've used oil and coffee to try and stain that stone on a 4-hour dwell. You can see how the non-sealed on the very left-hand side, that coffee and oil have gone right into it. The water-based sealers have done extremely well, and to some degree, the solvent-based sealers haven't done as well. Is this a blanket statement for all water-based and all solvent-based sealers? No, but it's showing how that technology in water-based sealers has gotten to the point now where, for the most part, it's equal or eclipsed what solvent-based sealers were or are. With these installations as well, and with some of the sealers and coaters, we have to look at, once again, going back to the installation, ensuring that the sealers that we're going to use can be breathable. If we look at the photo on the right, if this is all, granted, most of this is all glass, but the vertical white stripes through it, that's all natural stone. Using a sealer that's not, or that is going to allow the vapor transference through. So if any moisture gets into the assembly itself, allowing the ventilation, allowing it to breathe throughout the assembly, where Mrs. Jones's countertop on the right, a little bit less of a concern because there shouldn't be moisture trapped within the stone or underneath the stone itself. So once again, things to be aware of when we're looking at these stones, we're looking at these installations, or how we're going to specify products going into these installations. Outside of water-based versus solvent-based sealers, the other major type that we have to look at is topical sealers and penetrating sealers. So the photo on the left shows a great example of a tile that does not have any sealer on it, and you can see how contaminants are working their way into the pore structure of the stone itself. The photo underneath we have is of a penetrating sealer, where it works in and it closes that pore structure to some degree of the stone, not allowing dirt, grime, etc. to get into it. And then just a straight topical sealer that sits on the surface of the tile and the stone, not allowing dirt, grime to get into it. With penetrating sealers, something to be aware of is you're going down fractions of a millimeter or fractions of an inch into the stone itself. It's not making the stone or it's not penetrating all the way through the stone. It's creating a barrier around it and within that top layer to create that workability and that stain resistance ability. Now, examples of sealers is, oh, sorry, Lewis.
Yeah, I was just going to note that it's important to note that with topical sealers, they don't breathe. A penetrating sealer will absorb in but will allow for moisture vapor transmission. Topical sealers will not. So, and therefore not recommended in wet areas, especially in shower applications, on the floors. Just they'll peel up over time and could cause a slip fall hazard.
Thanks for Lewis. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. The photos on the right, or the photo in the center and the photo on the right, are good examples of where obviously we're running into installation issues. The one on the far right is a white natural stone where they are trying to use a contrasting grout color. The tile was not sealed prior to the grout being installed, and you can see how it's leaving a lot of haze and colorant from the grout bleeding into that stone itself. Generally, once that's happened, sucks to be you. We're going to have to rip it all out and reinstall. The photo in the center, this is another example of a contrasting grout color that was used with this gray tile. And you can see how that colorant is leaching into the sides of the tile, creating a really nice French bleed pattern around it, but probably not what the customer wants. So something to be aware of. These, it is, in a lot of cases, it's something that's overlooked, but can lead to some very expensive whoopsies down the road. So how do we try and mitigate this? Is we pre-seal or pre-grouting sealing. This helps protect certain tiles and stone from grout staining coming in from the side. It penetrates into the stone itself before it's either laid or grouted. Especially with very high porosity stones, we want to do this to mitigate some of the issues that could happen if we have a contrasting grout color coming through. Generally, what the industry as a whole is going to recommend is we are not going to use a topical sealer to do this. We're going to want to use a penetrating sealer to do this because it's going to get into the pores of the surface of that tile itself and not sit on the surface. If you just go with a straight topical sealer, depending on the one that is going to be used, it could work as a bond inhibitor, making issues for tile installation down the road. So be cognitive of that. These are some great examples here of the photo on the far left and the photo on the right of where tile was not pre-sealed prior to installation, and you can see the color and you can see some weird shading coming through. The photo in the middle is an example of where the trades did what's called a six-sided seal, and the tile is essentially dumped into a bucket of penetrating sealer. It is pulled out and then allowed to dry prior to installation. This could be done just by physically dumping the tile into a bucket of penetrating sealer, or it can be done rolled on. But what we're trying to achieve is, as it says within the name, a six-sided seal, top, bottom, and all four edges to be protected from.
And I would refer I would
in.
suggest you refer to the manufacturers to check to make sure which penetrating sealer is suitable for six-sided sealing that will not impede bond during installation, because some can impede bond.
Yeah, a little bit off topic, but also comes into play when we're working with natural stone, and that color issues that we can run into. When you're installing a light color natural stone, specify a white thin set. If you're working with a darker color natural stone, specify a gray thin set. That'll help with some issues going forwards, but that's another topic for another day. Here's another example. Photo on the left, not sealed prior to grouting, and you can see that colorant coming through. Photo on the right, it was sealed prior to the grout being installed. Granted, yeah, it's a white grout with a lighter color natural stone, but you can see how it's color consistent all the way through. So as Lewis was just mentioning, what does the manufacturer recommend? The best thing you can do is go back to that tile and stone manufacturer and ask them do we need to seal this product? What type of sealers do you recommend, whether it's from a manufacturer or just a blanket category? And how do you want that done to ensure that the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of an installation aren't going to run into issues down the road? Also work with the manufacturer of those sealers themselves to see what they recommend for certain installations, because depending on the stone type, depending on the tile type, we're going to want to steer you a certain direction on what's going to be best for that installation. So something that I alluded to right at the very beginning, but it does come up in conversation, is do you need to seal porcelain tile? Maybe. We need to look at that porcelain tile. We need to see, whether it's a glazed or a non-glazed porcelain tile. Is it a polished versus non-polished or a matte finish porcelain tile? We may need to seal it because not all porcelain tiles are created equal. They may not necessarily meet the specific ISO or ANSI standards that we're looking for within the industry. And in turn, yes, your porcelain tile may have to be sealed. Some polished porcelains, because when you polish it, you're opening that pore structure, may be more susceptible to staining. A great example that I have is in a previous life when I worked for a tile distributor. Um, one of the retail stores that I was calling on was redoing their showroom, and they were installing a 24 by 24 white porcelain tile, polished porcelain, and they were using a black grout color. And after the trade had packed the grout into the joints and come out and cleaned it, you could see the black grout had worked its way into about a 4-inch strip around the edge of that porcelain tile on every tile. They worked hard to try and mitigate that. In the end, with a lot of different cleaners and problem solvers, it did help mitigate it for the most part. But for super OCD or CDO people like me that stare at a floor all the time, you could see noticeable shade differences. So yes, some porcelain tiles do have to be sealed, but not all porcelain tiles have to be sealed. Check with the manufacturer. If there are concerns, do a mock-up.
As a note too,
See how it's going to be.
Sorry, John, when we polish natural stone, we densify the pores, right? We densify it, making it less porous. The opposite occurs whenever we have a polished porcelain tile. It opens the pore structure, making it more absorptive. So therefore, making it more important to usually and refer to the tile manufacturer to seal it prior to installation to avoid any water staining, because even water can stain that tile. So, but refer to the sealer manufacturer as to which sealer they recommend for to seal a porcelain tile.
So moving on into stone enhancers. Stone enhancers are a really cool product because depending on the stone that we're working with can really change the overall look and outcome of the stone itself. Traditionally speaking, these are impregnating sealers that will work into the pore itself. And if they're installed correctly, keyword correctly, they will not change the coefficient of friction or dynamic coefficient of friction of that tile or that stone itself. Traditionally we're using this with a honed, a lot of travertines, some marbles, but not really, but a lot of travertines and a lot of slates to give a look. Always do a test, always do a mock-up. Here are some great examples here of using these stone enhancers. But in a lot of cases, once they're installed, they cannot be removed. So if you have an installation where you have a customer that goes, I want a high gloss wet look. Okay. Do you want high gloss or do you want wet look? Because those are two different things, and there may not be a product that can do both. Oh, just do whatever. Okay, great. And you go ahead and you install a color enhancer on the floor, wall, ceiling, whatever it may be, and they go, cool, I don't like it. Too bad. You're probably not going to be able to remove it. It's going to be there forever. So do mock-ups, ensure that the customer is happy with what it's going to be prior to moving forwards. And as I said right at the beginning of the presentation, these stone enhancers could be a wet look. They could be a high polished look. They could give a matte finish to it. There are lots of different products that can help topically alter what the surface of that tile is going to look like without changing the structure of the tile itself. With that being said, once again, past life, when I worked for a tile distributor, we would have a lot of customers come in and go, oh, I've got this porcelain tile that looks dirty. Can I just put a stone enhancer on it to make it look shiny again? No. You're going to have to do some elbow grease and get in there and really just clean the floor. Unless you've been using some really harsh chemicals that have etched the surface of that porcelain, 9 times out of 10, it's probably just dirty and it needs to be cleaned properly.
John, can I add a quick thing?
Fire away, Dennis.
I came across a few years ago with a flagstone. I used a penetrating pre-grout seal, but I used a high-end penetrator, and when I stone enhanced it after, it left it blotchy. So that's something to consider with stone and enhancement as well. If you're going to pre-seal it, use a pre-sealer that's not going to affect the color enhancer you're going to put on after. So I learned that one the hard way. So anyway,
And how much did that cost you, if you don't mind me
well, it
asking?
cost me about 3 days labor.
Okay,
So
we'll just
not
leave
a
it at
huge
that.
deal. And that was Sealer's Choice Gold I used as a penetrating, and it didn't mix with the stone enhancer. So yeah.
Yeah, Dennis brings up a really good point. As I mentioned before, do mock-ups. See how the assembly is going to work, not just from a customer standpoint of if they're going to be happy with it, but make sure that all the products are going to play well in the sandbox well together. No, thanks, Dennis, for that example. If done right, these stone enhancers and these sealers will last 10, 15 years. This is a great example here of a facility in California where I don't think there's photos on it, or if they are, I can't see it, but I think it was done in 03, 04. We're looking 11, 12 years later when we went back to look at it, and it still looks just as good as the day it was installed. So right products maintained correctly can last an extreme amount of time. Moving into the last little bit in the maintenance side of things with tile and stone, what are we telling our customers on how to maintain these floors? Are we telling a commercial client the same thing as what we're telling a residential client? Probably not, but things to be aware of on how they're going to be done. The big thing that we need to look at when maintaining a tile and stone installation is most sealers, actually all good quality sealers, are going to be pH neutral, being 7. Depending on the cleaners that are going to be used, bleach is a great example. I can probably think off the top of my head of multiple old Nonas that just use bleach and water, or like to use lemon juice to clean their tile. Great. You've just stripped off all the sealer that you spent a couple hours installing.
Yeah. One of the worst ones is vinegar and water to clean. Vinegar is an acid, as you can see by the pH scale. It's important to understand the pH scale and how it works, because that'll help you determine which cleaner you're going to use for which what's being soiled, what you're trying to clean up.
Yeah. And ensuring that depending on the area that's being maintained, how, what sort of chemicals are it's going to be exposed to. If you're a messy cook and you like leaving lemon juice all over your countertop, Lisa openly just acknowledged that. Your sealer is probably going to wear off faster than someone who is extremely OCD like me, who cleans up anything as soon as it touches my countertop. No disrespect to Lisa. Sorry about that. But be aware of how that surface is being maintained, how it's being cleaned, and be cognizant of that. Look for cleaners that are pH neutral for most cleaning installations, so it doesn't upset the balance and the force of that sealer or coating that's going to be put on top. Cleaners have consequences. Without naming names, here's some great examples of some sealers that we see being used on a somewhat regular basis that do more damage than good.
Yes. Some of the biggest problems. Yeah. Some of the biggest problems I see out there is cleaners that you spray on, you leave it for a few minutes, and then you hose off. Those are typically enzyme-based cleaners. And those enzymes, when they start to activate and they work, they can create this thing called oleic acid, which can deteriorate sealers, deteriorate grout, etch a stone. I have actually seen it in one case where it affected the finish of a porcelain tile. So avoid those cleaners.
Yeah, absolutely. They're just outside of traditional tile and porcelain tile installations. A lot of people will use a certain product here that begins with W that my cursor is over if everyone can see it. There's a lot of solvents that are in that specific product without naming names. What's that going to do to your resin tile? Outside of what is it going to do to a sealer? If a sealer has been applied, what's it going to do to your resin tile, and how can it affect it or etch it or damage it moving forward? So once again, just because a sealer is applied doesn't mean that you can use any cleaner known to mankind. I'm not saying that sealers are temperamental, but it is something that you have to be cognitive of. This is another example here, similarly to what Dennis was saying, but with a little bit of a different jaunt to it. But the wrong cleaner was used on top of this granite slab, and that was a $2,000 whoopsie for a customer who had to have their granite countertop repolished to get it back to where it is. Same thing here. You've got a black granite installation where the wrong product was used, and how it's etched the surface of that granite and altered the color of the stone or the granite itself. Furthermore to what Lewis was saying, especially commercial kitchens, depending on how these cleaners are being applied, they can dissolve grout extraordinarily quickly, especially if the wrong grout's being used. There's been several occasions where I've been asked to go into commercial kitchens to assess what the problem is going on and why their grout is being leached out so quickly. And I was reading the technical data sheet of the cleaners that they're used, and they go, "Oh no, it's a no wash cleaner. We just spread it on the floor and then we just go back to work." But on like page 6 of that TDS in very fine print at the very bottom, it says, "Oh, you need to clean it afterwards." Oh, great. Okay, so this is like your marketing of self-leveling levels itself. No, you do still need to clean it. You still need to maintain it.
We need to go back afterwards and neutralize it. So in the best analogy I give people is when you're taking a shower and you soap up, after you soap up, do you just walk out of the shower? No, you wash off. So why wouldn't you treat your tile and stone the same? After you wash it, go back and clean it with just some clean water to get rid of the soap. That soap residue can actually attract dirt and soil and just cause it to build up.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another example here of installations gone wrong, where we've got an interesting leaching on the left-hand side coming out of I think in this installation itself, it was a red wine stain once again. Same thing with the photo on the right. I've circled it in red, but you can see 2 watermarks on that stone where the customer kept saying, I sealed my stone. Okay, when did you do it? 2 years ago. Okay, well, what do you use to clean? Vinegar and water. Cool. All right. You essentially just remove the sealer right off the stone, and that's why you're getting these watermarks. Depending on what's happened and depending on the contaminant that's gotten onto the stone itself, there are ways to try and mitigate it. And this is an example here of where we've got a stain on a marble. You can use products, poultice stain removers, where you apply a concoction of different dry chemicals with water to make a putty. You put it over the stain itself, you let it dwell. After a certain amount of time, you remove that concoction off the surface, and the nature of the makeup of a poultice stain remover is it can help, in some cases, alleviate or pull that stain out of the stone itself. Will it fix everything? No. But once again, you have Mrs. Jones who leaves a red wine glass on a marble countertop that hasn't sealed, and it leaves a red wine stain. If you get on that quickly enough, you can help mitigate it and pull that red wine out of it, or whatever the substance may be that's staining. So with routine maintenance, ensure that we're using a pH neutral cleaner to help clean the floor or the wall or ceiling or that stone installation, so it doesn't disturb the sealer that's been put onto that tile or stone or grout, to extend the longevity of it itself. With periodic maintenance, we may have to go in and use a more heavy duty product, but if the system was built correctly from the get-go, your periodic maintenance is going to be less labor intensive, because you've already set the good groundwork for cleaning and maintaining that floor or wall or whatever it may be, that installation. So when everything goes right, we get beautiful installations like this. If you do have questions, there's a lot of support that does exist within the industry. There is some documentation within the TTMAC on tile and stone maintenance and how to mitigate that. Go back to the manufacturers, talk to distributors, talk to technical reps like Lewis or myself, on how we can try and work and how we can mitigate or come to a solution where it's not going to damage the floor, wall, ceiling, whatever it may be. So, lastly, just to quickly wrap this up, we want to see more installations like this where everything's gone right, and less installations like this where everything has clearly gone very, very wrong. So just to finish it off, let's continue to make more showcases and less case studies. And Lisa, that's all I had.
Now the chance for questions. It was an excellent presentation. I even learned some new stuff too. I'm using the wrong cleaner.
It's usually the one that Lewis and I get a lot when we do this presentation. You see people just rapidly writing stuff down going, oh man.
I did that. There are questions. So there's one from Drew who says, is there a grout sealer that really works? I've never seen one.
I think the biggest issue when it comes to sealers, especially grout sealers, is in the application process. Grout is very porous. To properly seal it, or can be very porous, to properly seal it, you'd have to do multiple applications. The density of the grout's what's going to dictate how many coats you're going to apply, as well as the quality of the grout sealer that you're going to use.
Well, and get that grout really clean before you even reapply it, right?
Absolutely.
Get it clean and let it dry.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you don't get it off if you don't get that soil off the grout, you're not allowing the sealer to get in and absorb properly. So it has to be cleaned.
Yeah, and it's another one of those where I get the phone call a lot going, well, I sealed the grout and it still looks dirty. This is kind of like the computer going, did you check, did you turn it off and turn it back on? Well, did you clean the grout before you sealed it? No. Well, there's your first mistake. So Dennis, as you said, and Lewis, you furthered to that, ensuring that your grout or your tile is very clean prior to installing of that sealer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, bye-bye.
Now, Shamana, I see that you had a question in regards to porcelain tiles having a really low water absorption and how do sealers penetrate into it. As I was saying, not all porcelain tiles are created equal. I know a lot of the products that you bring in, we're not going to run into that issue because they're Dutch. The Dutch do things well. But some of the more cost-effective, traditionally Chinese-made products that may not necessarily meet the ISO or the ANSI standard can run into issues. It's not a blanket statement that, yes, all porcelain tiles have to be sealed, because that's not necessarily true. But certain ones may, depending on where they're being manufactured and whether it's a matte finish versus a polish finish, may dictate that, yes, you do need to seal it prior to grouting or prior to installation.
I've seen a porcelain tile where we actually put a drop of water on it, and right before your eyes, the water is being absorbed into the tile. It was that porous. I won't say where it was from, but the recommendation obviously was to seal it, and you got to pre-seal it before the installation. And I've seen it again on job sites where water has actually stained during the installation process a porcelain tile, and they had to seal it prior to install.
I have another question. It may not be on sealers. To avoid grout hazing, on the ceramic tile or porcelain tile, is it recommended to use an impregnator before they grout?
Sure, absolutely. Especially with natural stone. Would definitely recommend you sealing it prior to grouting. That way you're preventing any of the dyes or to affect the stone itself, and it will make it easier to clean up. Even with some porcelain tiles as well, you can use that. There's other products that, like what we have, a grout release that you can apply over top of it, creates a barrier, makes it easier to install, or install the grout. And so that way, during the cleaning process, everything comes right off. So it's very easy.
Thank you.
Yeah, especially working with some more textured tile, or when you're working with epoxies, these grout releases are fantastic products to help mitigate the possible ramifications of grout haze. To some degree as well, better quality trades are going to do a better job of mitigating grout haze. But as I said, some grouts are a little bit more difficult to work with. Some stones are a little bit more difficult to work with because of texture. And using some of these release agents can help.
Is there a cost difference between the grout release and an impregnator, or there?
It would depend on the tile, stone. Typically, the grout release is lower cost. Is a pretty cost-effective way of making it easy to clean the grout haze off this tile. Absolutely.
So you guys, so for a commercial kitchen, your nasty commercial kitchen tile, you're saying that the grout release is going to be your best method with your heavy epoxy grouts?
With the on the quarry tiles?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We've used it before. Yeah.
I've never actually read that that's the best way to go about it. It's always the best way to get the grout haze off with a little bit of, dish soap and that kind of junk. But the last one I did was a nightmare. So if I had just put grout release on it, it would have cleaned up way better, right?
Yep, absolutely would have helped.
All right, next time.
Yeah, same thing with some of these newer generation pre-mixed grouts, especially the first generation ones. They were a little bit more difficult to clean. And that's where we saw a lot of grout release being used, because they would flash cure, or at least start to cure extremely quickly. So similarly to epoxies, we were seeing a lot of grout release being used to help extend the trade's workability before they're going back and doing an initial clean or a secondary clean. Lisa, I don't see any more questions.
No, I don't see any more questions. If you have one, please feel free to make yourself known. Otherwise, we will sign off. Reminder to
Thank you,
reach
everyone.
out. If anybody has needs a certificate for self-reporting, please reach out to me and I'll happily send you one.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see everybody.
Thank you very much for taking the time to train us on all these techniques and information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Thank you, Lisa, as well.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. All right. I have to stop recording.